Okay, so my research is actually the culmination of my 10 years getting my doctorate in education, learning and instruction from the University of San Francisco. And I designed this, basically I was testing out a pedagogical approach for teaching argument to first-year community college students. And I designed it for face-to-face instruction, since that was primarily how I was teaching at Ohlona College. However, when I was finally, I defended my first 3 chapters, my proposal, which was the methodology I was going to use, and I was finally ready to actually implement my research project at Ohlona College in my first year argument and research class. That's exactly when COVID hit. So I had to sort of on the fly convert my pedagogical approach to teaching synchronously online. And so that actually is just a little bit of background, because that actually kind of became part of the results that I got related to the fact that I collected data from a class that started face-to-face and then just suddenly went to synchronous online. It was fall of 2020. And then I also did it the next semester. And that was actually kind of interesting in itself, because students were a little bit better able to do this approach because they'd already been working in the synchronous Zoom environment. So I just wanted to kind of contextualize when I collected the data. It was actually in 2020, right during the shutdown. So the purpose of this, of my research, was to explore, many of you who teach, English composition or argument and research might be familiar with the Toulmin model. Although it was developed back in the 1950s, it's still very common, and it looks at argument as having a certain structure. So Toulmin, if you're not familiar with it, or just as a refresher, he basically has this idea that your claim, which often becomes your thesis statement, your major claim about a topic, like, you're for something or against something, that's your main claim, and then you have evidence for that claim, but you also present the counter argument, or what would another perspective on that topic be, and then you also provide that evidence, and then you do a rebuttal. So it's a very sort of classical structure. You do a rebuttal. But Toulmin also suggested that it was important to look at how the evidence logically related to the claim, the counterclaim, and the rebuttal. And also he included something called the backing. So you would actually consider, well, what are some of the values or beliefs that might not even be stated, but lie behind and support the claims, the evidence, and the warrants. Then, of course, argumentation theory developed, and Walton came along and suggested that, well, that static view of argument is not really that realistic. It's really more like a dialogue. And he suggested that there's different kinds of ways arguments develop sort of more organically, and that would be, and many people took his work and decided, well, that would be good to kind of incorporate that into your pedagogical approach. So basically that's what I tried to develop a pedagogical approach that would incorporate this dialectical aspect. And I'm certainly not the first person to do it. So I relied really heavily on Nussbaum, who developed something called the V diagram, which I'll show you a version of that, where students are sort of guided in how to interrogate each other and ask each other questions about their positions. So a strong argument, which is what I was trying to help students achieve, is a claim that's backed logically by verifiable evidence from reliable sources, includes the counter argument or counter view with evidence, and either a rebuttal of that evidence or an integration of the opposing evidence into the claim. So that's kind of a new way of looking at it, where you're not just trying to win, you're actually considering other perspectives and maybe even integrating it into your own claim. Because this was dissertation research, it was very formal, and what I was looking for was a gap in the research, so that I could do a study that would sort of fill that gap. so that's what I was trying to do in really emphasizing alternative viewpoints and creating a dialogue between claims and counterclaims, and considering integration as a possible goal rather than just like, defeating like the other side. So what I did, the methodology I used was I had students write outlines on a topic, and that presented an argument on a set topic that I gave them. Then I did the pedagogy. Then I had them do another set of outlines on another topic. And then I had them do outlines for their research papers. And then I actually used a rubric to analyze, how well did they do? Did they actually improve after the pedagogy? So, and this is just a picture of the basic Toolman structure, which I was using in order to evaluate the arguments. This is the rubric. It looks really complicated, and it is, but it actually has been used in other studies, a couple of other studies, and it has a high degree of reliability. And in fact, I did inter-rater reliability, and the rubric, once you learn how to use the rubric, it actually, different people scoring the outlines will come up with similar scores. So you'll notice on here that the claim is not, students are pretty able to come up with a claim, like what is my thesis statement? Then it's a little more difficult for students in first year comp classes to come up with that counter view, counter argument, and the data supporting it, and the rebuttal claim and rebuttal data or evidence. So data here just really refers to the evidence. So these scores, they get a little more points for the counter argument and the rebuttal claim than they do for the other claim, whereas the evidence would be the same. And I'm not going to go over in detail, but you can read through this if you want to on your own. But basically, it gives you a pretty fine-grained look at how strong the argument is. So the sort of technical research questions I was looking at was, well, do the overall scores get higher? But then I was also interested in, did I find a statistical significant difference when I'm just looking at the different chunks of the argument, like claim and evidence, counterclaim and evidence, rebuttal claim and evidence. So as I mentioned before, I did this in, the spring class was the one that went through the COVID shutdown, and then the fall class, they had already been doing synchronous learning for a while. And I had a total of 43 students. Those were the students who signed consent and actually did all 3 assignments. And the other thing I did is I surveyed students to find out, I really wanted students to be interested in the topics that they were working on. I didn't want to just have them do random topics. So I actually surveyed my students to find out what topics were they interested in. So keep in mind, this was already a couple of years ago. Gun control, most of you who teach English Comp know that this is a super popular topic. It has been for many years. So gun control was the most popular topic. Immigration, universal health care, e-cigarettes probably wouldn't be so high now that there's not as much controversy about them. We know they're just almost as bad as regular cigarettes. Voting rights, marijuana legalization, environmental justice. So these, you notice these were all tied, actually. They're listed in order of how many votes they got. So e-cigarettes, voting rights, marijuana legalization, environmental justice were all tied. And Black Lives Matter came in right after that. And then college affordability, opioid crisis. This is actually sorry, I'm blanking on the name, but the Green Act that didn't get passed, but Biden did take elements of it in some of the bills he eventually passed. And then I was rather surprised, Me Too, kind of came in a distant last down here. So I drew the topics I used for the set topics on the pre and post test. I pulled out of here, and I actually used e-cigarettes and environmental justice. And then their research paper topic was on gun control. So what I did is I wanted to also use a DEI lens. So I chose my reading material and course material for the course, thinking along those lines. So for gun control, the key text was Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. So he talks about, racist violence. He talks about his own experiences in Baltimore, and he talks about, the school to prison pipeline and the constant threat of violence and the problem with guns growing up in his neighborhood, and the death of a close friend of his at the hands of the police. So this is definitely looking at this topic through a racial lens. But then we also, supplemented that with lots of articles with statistics about gun control. And we listened to interviews with young people, student activists, but also students who grew up hunting and who grew up in families where gun ownership is very normal and they are trained to use guns and all that. So, and then we also talked about all these different legal issues such as red flag laws, Second Amendment, and all that. So we covered this topic, definitely though through a DI lens. Climate change, we also looked at things kind of globally using Replenishing the Earth by Wangari Maathai, who started the Green Belt movement. And that shows how, the global south is going to suffer much more than the global north when we're talking about climate change. It also talks about the roots, from colonialism and the importance of understanding the indigenous perspective and the kind of knowledge they can bring to the problem of climate change. Then we also read How Culture Influences the Climate Change Debate by Hoffman, and it shows how culture and political beliefs and values and corporate corruption led to the Republican Party's transformation from one that supported climate action to one that denied the existence of human-caused climate change. And we included a lot of TED Talks, videos, articles to include a wide range of perspectives from scientists, social scientists, activists, and lived experiences of people. And students were encouraged to incorporate their lived experiences into, and now I'm just talking more broadly about the other papers they wrote on these topics. So, including the gun control topic. And we looked at Black and brown scientists such as Terrain Hayes, who discussed his work on atrazine and frogs. So he led to groundbreaking research on how atrazine, an herbicide, was affecting agricultural workers, and how Syngenta, the company he worked for, basically tried to ruin his reputation. So this is a case study in how corporations can step into the arena of science and really affect things in a bad way. We also looked at things like how fossil fuel companies, what they did is very analogous to what cigarette companies did back in the day. So we looked into all these ways in which information gets corrupted and changed around through corporate interference. So the experimental instruction that I actually used, so that just gives you kind of background on the course and the kinds of readings they were doing to help students consider like alternative perspectives and understand bias in the material that they may find when they're doing their own research on various topics. So I linked out to my lecture here that I used, and I think I'm just going to click through it really quickly. I don't know how much time I have. Okay, I'm about halfway through. Oops. Let me see. I'm going to go back. That didn't seem to work. Oh, yeah. Okay, so this was the actual lecture I used in my class. So let's see. Oh, I'm way at the bottom. I'll just go back to the top. So this is how I actually, this was interactive. So students, we talked about what makes a good argument, and we reviewed the Toulmin stuff. I'm going to kind of go through this fast just to give you a sense of the lecture. So then we looked at my side bias as well, thinking about like, what are my own ideas on a topic? What do I already think about a topic? So we covered that. And then this little picture, which you probably all seen, you can see a young woman's face or an old woman's face. And it's just kind of a graphic way to show you that, your own perception can influence what you actually see. Then we looked at a variety of photographs that are kind of famous, iconic photographs, and we talked about how your own background, your own knowledge might influence how you interpret these photographs. And we also looked at racial bias in captioning photographs, just as a way of illustrating how people, even from so-called reputable newspapers, will get things wrong. So I'm kind of going through this, but then we looked at how arguments are constructed in scholarly articles by looking at the abstracts. So this was all sort of like a prelude to the group work. And the group work, let's see if I can get back to the other, oopsies. Okay, this is gonna be kind of challenging for me. 1 second. Okay, yeah. So that was the lecture part, which was also interactive, but the probably more interesting part is, we used the Green New Deal, was what I used for the instruction part. So what they did is I put them into pairs, and they each had to take one side of the Green New Deal and come up with some information and some evidence for their claim. So they're really working on claim and evidence at this point. But then they had to ask each other questions in pairs. And the questions are modeled down here. So they would they just would ask each other questions about how strong the evidence was, where did they get the evidence, and that kind of thing. And then they would decide, is there a way to integrate the two different sides, or do they really think that one side is much stronger than the other? Then they went from being in pairs to being in larger groups. And in the end, they had to present a poster to the class with their sort of final argument. And because they went through this process, they definitely would have, argument, counter argument, rebuttal in there, and then they might end up with some level of integration of both sides. So that was the basic instruction that I used. Then going back to the research part of it, is we used the I did have inter-rater reliability, so I had other raters also doing this. They were professors at Alone, and we had very good inter-rater reliability on our rubric. And this was kind of an interesting thing. I looked at, I wanted to just take the two classes and do the whole thing together, but I found out there was a statistically significant difference between the results from each of the two classes. And so I ended up having to deal with the data separately. And I felt that probably the difference was that students struggled more in the class that went through the COVID shutdown, because they had to learn how to do everything. And I was also struggling more. So we had to suddenly do everything synchronously online. And so we had to do the instruction online, whereas it was actually created for in person. Whereas the second class didn't have as much of a struggle. So what did I find out? I got statistical significance and actually a pretty large effect size on most, on the pre-post test and the post test to the research paper outline and the pre-test to the research paper outline. There were just a few places where I didn't get statistical significance, and that was with the earlier class. The other thing that was interesting is the instruction really helped them with the counter argument and the rebuttals more than just the claim. So actually, this was kind of significant. Students really know how to do a claim. They knew it before the instruction, they knew it afterwards, but they didn't really understand counter argument and rebuttal, and they really improved dramatically after the instruction in those areas. So basically, I already talked about this, and I'm running out of time. So a key finding was claims, they already know how to do that, but counterclaims and rebuttals, this kind of method, I wasn't doing a comparison study, so I wasn't comparing it to some other method. I just found out that this method, using this dialectical method, really worked well. I'm kind of going to skip over this so I can get to, I've already summarized this basically. So implications for research. Well, I did find statistical difference between the class that had experience with synchronous online learning and the class that didn't. So I think it's really important, like if you're teaching, now we're kind of pretty far away from COVID, but I think there are more classes that are synchronous online than, we really didn't teach that way at all for the most part. So I think it's really important to make sure students can do the group work in a synchronous environment. And that is probably the most challenging thing. And I haven't actually tried to do this asynchronously. I think it'd be a whole different ballgame, because how would you do the dialogue if you can't do that in real time? So that would be something to kind of work on. And the other thing we noticed when looking at the outlines is that that they might need another intervention when it comes to when they're actually working on their own research paper. Then there's another level of complexity, which is, of course, they're doing their own research. When they were doing the pre-post outlines, they didn't really have to do their own research. I just gave them all the information because they were doing that in class. So I think that the information literacy component of it, I think, could be brought to bear on improving their ability to find sources from a variety of different perspectives. And the other thing to explore was, I was just looking at the outlines. So I never actually looked to see, well, did this actually help the papers themselves? I really wanted to focus on the argument, the structure of the argument. So that's why I chose to limit it to just the outlines. And also, a lot of the research is actually done on L1, L2 students. And my class, I actually didn't include the demographics of my class in here. I forgot to, but at Ohlone College, like a lot of community colleges, we do have a high percentage of students for whom English is a second or third language, many international students. So I think that adds that's another thing to look at, is does it really work for these students as well? So implications for the pedagogy, I think I thought that more support could be given at reading, like finding good materials, reading it, and like maybe more time could be spent on analyzing the argument from the reading materials instead of just focusing on developing their own arguments. And I think I've already summarized all this. Oh, another big takeaway, and if I have time, I wanted to do something in chat really quick. Students showed a strong interest in social and environmental justice topics. And so I think that it's really important. Like, I did this survey now, it's been like 2.5 years ago, or actually 3 years ago. And I think what topics students are interested in, obviously changes and gets updated, right? So gun control always seems, I've been teaching for 20 years and gun control always seems to be at the top. Not that I'm that happy, maybe I'm getting kind of tired of it, but I think it's really important to kind of keep your finger on the pulse of what are students really interested in, because I think definitely that informs their work. And also, oftentimes students are interested in topics that have synergies with their own lived experience, and that was certainly the case in my class. So I think I still just have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to stop the share. And what I wanted to do in chat is, I'm really curious. I wanted to do a 1, 2, 3 share in chat. So I was going to give everybody like just 2 minutes to write out what are some topics that you use in your like freshman comp classes or whatever classes you're teaching that you think really resonate with students like right now. And also maybe add, do you try to ask students or even give them a survey? Like, how do you find out what topic students are going to be most interested in? So I'm going to give everybody it's 2:41. So maybe just 2 minutes. And I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, go at 2:43. So you can just say like what topics students are interested in, or how do you find out what topics they're interested in? And that'll be our participation today. Okay, so 1 minute left. Okay. I think I said 2:43. Oh, people are already doing it. That's great. Okay, so I'll just do 1, 2, 3, go now, if you haven't posted yet. Oh yeah, these are some great ideas. Yeah, so some people, when you're doing argument research, you just let them choose whatever topic you want. And the only reason I sometimes don't do that is I want them all to read and discuss the same text so that they're all learning and reading together and talking about it. Though, I mean, ultimately, yes, if students, sometimes students have trouble coming up with a topic too, but climate change, mental wellness. Yeah, mental wellness is a big topic. Yeah, so hopefully everybody's doing what I'm not going to read through all the chat out loud, but these are some really great ideas. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, several people are saying they don't actually, they let students just completely choose it, right? Yeah, I always kind of argue back and forth about that with myself. Okay, so I guess everybody's posted who wanted to. That leaves 2 minutes for questions. Sorry. Does anybody have any questions? Nope. Okay. Well, you can always email me if you have questions later. Okay. Thanks a lot for listening.
I'll just follow up with one thing that I was just, it's a clarification. And so when you were doing the whole process of teaching argument and breaking it down for the students, the students do an annotated bib. I was just trying to see where the assignment came, or where it was in your course, and if there was like annotated bibliography, or was it just this outline that you used?
So for the research paper, well, for all the research papers they were writing in the class, they always went through a structured phases where they did, usually they posted a topic. So within the broader context, they could choose their focus. So like with gun control, they could focus on red flag laws, or they could focus on school violence, or they could focus on police brutality. So they could kind of choose their own topic within the broader umbrella. So they chose a topic, then they did an outline, and at the outlining stage, they also found sources, but they never had to actually do an annotated bibliography. Then they turn it into a full-blown paper. And that paper, I would give them feedback on the topic, the outline, the rough draft they would do peer review on. And then if a student really wanted me to read it, I would read it, or I would refer them to the tutoring center to get personalized feedback. Then the final draft I would read and give them feedback. And then if they wanted to do a further rewrite, they could. That was optional. Yeah, so that was the whole overall structure. And
hold on, Sharon. We're getting into time right now.
Okay, yeah. So that's how it worked. There was no annotated bibliography. So that would be a good idea, though. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
I appreciate it.